Everyone has arrived.
Yay! All right, we're gonna be talking about books 5 and 6. So despite it being a lot of reading, technically, I don't think it's gonna be as slow to move through them as it might first appear because a lot of it is kind of the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, but I
Um,
think you meant box 6 and 7, right?
yes, books 6 and 7. That's correct. Which is, yeah, I'm looking at book 6, so I don't know why I said 5. um, So, he does the same shtick we see, I feel like, in a lot of the other parts of the book as far as just do it mentality, right?
Yeah.
You have responsibilities, you've got to be a part of this world, you have a duty. Just do it and don't mess with other people. Like, don't worry about other people, what they're doing, don't let it bother you, do your own thing.
Be a
And
man and do
be,
what a man has got to do.
yeah, be a man and do what a man's got to do.
Cue Dr. Horrible song.
And then he even says, like, why do I care for anything else than to return to the element of earth as soon as it may be? And that almost seems sadder to me, but given in the context of the rest of the kind of more stoic thought process, I don't see it necessary. If someone were to say that out of context, I would be worried about them having, like, some kind of suicidal ideation. But in this context, I do interpret it differently.
Well, he also is, in that particular paragraph, he is saying that if the world is like this, then what do we have to live for? But then
Right.
concludes that the world is not, in fact, like that, and therefore we do have reason for living.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah, I think it was in the context of if the world is maybe only atoms with no governing principle,
Yeah.
but then he goes back about no, there is a governing principle, so there is purpose to everything.
Yeah. He goes back and forth on that a lot. I think that I never quite realized how spiritual he kind of was about that. He does seem to favor the idea of an overarching, like, governing deity. So I thought that was a little interesting. I overall do appreciate this sense of, like, you should be moving through the world in such a way that it benefits you and others, and is kind of like, don't get caught up in drama, don't overwork yourself about what's to come from the future, just kind of do what you're supposed to be doing. Seems to be kind of the big theme.
Yeah.
I do like this moment where he says the world is renewed by this change and flux, no less than the infinite series of ages by the perpetual succession of time.
It's basically impermanence.
Yeah, I love finding these moments of overlap, right? Of this, I'll say, reinforcement of concept across multiple schools of thought, as far as like Ben said, impermanence, and seeing it in multiple places is interesting.
Yeah.
Later, we'll
It's
he
true.
also,
It's true.
touches on interbeing and interconnectedness,
Yeah.
interdependence. So yeah.
Talks a bit about not letting the bad things bother you, but also not letting, like, fame and glory tempt you. It's very much live in the middle way to me when I read through this. Living that kind of lifestyle that isn't too ambitious, but also isn't just stuck in the mud, crawl into a ball and die.
if I can stop you on the, let's see, what number was that? On the page that we're on, is like one of the teens here on the left side on
Yeah.
yours. I started reading it in a different PDF because it's like this one was frustrating me. But where he's talking about all of the different things that you could strive for, but that won't make you happy there. But then he's talking about, okay, so people who are teachers create something at the end of it, and people like different craftsmen, the gardener creates this, that, vine dressers and the horse and those that manage horses and dogs, like this section. I thought that was one of the key points of this book. was this like, this is the point of life. The only things you should be doing are things that create something else, something that is productive in a literal sense, that you are making something happen good in the world that couldn't have existed without you doing that, and that you should spend your time in these endeavors.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. On getting that as the point often.
Yeah, there's that, then plus the like, you're gonna die soon.
You're gonna die soon. Accept it.
This is
It's
the
a
way
very
of life.
powerful
He just says
motivator.
it.
If someone's a
just like
jerk to
15
you,
times.
get over it.
Oh, there was actually a really good part where he talked about that too.
One of the instances is here in number 20. I have it highlighted. When we receive a blow, let us disregard it, thinking we are but at a trial of skill. For, as I said before, it is in our power to retire without feeling malice and ill will. Get insulted,
he
get
says-
over it. What he says.
Yeah, it's that idea that whatever happens on the outside can only touch your mind if you let it.
Mm-hmm. I am not 100% sure I understood whatever metaphor he was going for when he was talking about spelling Antoninus's name. But it was just the sense of like, why put on a show for such a simple task? Like, just do it. Just do the task. Once again, you know, the you're gonna die sensation over here with this life is short and all the advantages you can get by it is a pious disposition and selfish acts. Do everything as a disciple of Antoninus, Ninish. Imitate him in the vigor and the constancy of his good conduct. So it's just, yeah, like that. Make things that are productive, be this good energy in the world, and just do it.
Yeah, for the betterment of all.
Mm-hmm. As long as the hands and feet do the work they were made for, they move naturally and with ease. I thought that was an interesting sentiment, this idea that we need to be doing the work that makes sense for us. And I don't think that I'm interpreting it the way he meant, but one of the ways I interpreted it was sort of in the way that, like, my hands are, like, I'm good at certain things, but sometimes, and it would be weird for me to try to pick up things like being an electrician or trying to be a mechanic. Like, these are not my skill sets. They're not what my hands know how to do. I have not trained in those things. And so when I stick to the things I'm good at and continue doing them, I will move more naturally. Is kind of one of the ways I interpreted it, but I don't necessarily think that's what he was trying to say.
I'm sort of agreeing. It's not I think he isn't necessarily referring to skills, because skills you can develop, right? But maybe something that you have some natural talent for, that comes easy to you anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was more general, actually.
Yeah.
Like, just that your feet are supposed to be moving your body, your hands are supposed to be making or doing things, and as long as they're doing that, even if you work them very hard to the point that it's, causing pain or something, it's still going to feel good and it's going to be right because that's what they're meant to be doing.
I would say that's
Versus,
probably a lot
like-
close. Yeah, I think that's a lot closer to what he intended. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't even have to be a talent, but just that you're doing work and that we're, again, like, being productive in some way, that we're keeping our body, and also then, talking about the mind in the sentence after that, as long as you're making good use of these things that you're given in accordance with nature and all of these, like, greater objects that he says we should keep our eyes on these, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then no matter how hard you work it and how much, how tiring it may be or something, it's going to be worth it. It's going to feel good. And you'll want to keep doing it.
Just quick, on page 95, he also returns to that universal harmony, basically, saying that the growling deformity of a lion, the poison of serpents, and whatever seems offensive in nature, as thorns or dirt, are the outcome of something noble and beautiful.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, even things that we do not like or that could possibly harm us are eventually part of the divine plan, so to speak, and ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, part of the cosmic harmony.
Yeah. I think so.
Oh, actually, if you go back one,
Mm-hmm.
on the page after the one that Ben was just talking about, number 41,
Yep.
where he's talking about, if you think about things outside of yourself as good and evil, and you're like subject to, something is afflicting you, then you're always going to be miserable. But if you think that the things within your control as good or evil, in which you can choose, where you
Mm-hmm.
can choose to do something that is good, and everything outside of you kind of is just happening, and you won't have that same kind of like frustration or
Mm.
grudge or I thought that this was kind of an important point as well.
Yeah,
To
I agree.
Yeah.
things happen to
Mm-hmm.
you or things happen in others, and I think that this goes along with something he said, I think earlier in the chapter, but I can't remember which number it was. I did not highlight, but he mentioned something about when people do things sometimes that hurt you or offend you in some way, but it may not have been intentional, or even if it was, it's just like you can cautiously watch them to prevent this from happening again, but you don't have to judge them for it, and you don't have
Right.
to have any negative feelings about the things that happen outside of yourself. You should just be aware of the world around you and mostly focus on the things that you are doing and being aware of what you're causing. And that I thought that was actually very powerful, like a simple but very powerful point that he made a few times
Mm-hmm.
throughout the chapter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the recurring themes is also how people are quote unquote bad because of ignorance, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and if they could do better, they would.
Yeah, it's a very forgiving way of seeing things, right? It's a recognizing where their limitations might be and what they may or may not be capable of.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that there was that part. I can't remember any of the numbers. I didn't take good notes this week, but there was another part where he mentioned something about like sometimes people may, like, he pursues truth because the truth never hurt anybody. Only sticking to ignorance and no, something along those lines. Like if you stick with ignorance and self-deception, that's going to cause your suffering, and the truth will help you be free. And
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes people are doing those bad things, they just don't know the truth yet. Like they can pursue something like wealth, they can be greedy, they can pursue like hedonistic aims, and they may think that it's in their best interest, but they're wrong. And if they're wrong, you can show it to them, but you can't be upset about them attempting to try to do something that they think is going to be advantageous for themselves, because that's what we're all doing. They're just wrong about it and they don't see the truth. And your time is better spent educating them and showing them the error of their ways than it would be to be like to be condemning them or to be upset with them for just being ignorant, basically. I don't know if anybody else remembers where that is, because I don't.
Well, if we find it, we'll point it
It's
out.
in this book. It's in this
It's
book,
in
in
the
book 6,
book for
because
sure.
I read it this morning. I just didn't mark down where. And then he's so like back and forth with a lot of the themes, every 10 numbers or so, he's like revisiting something he just talked about a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
43, where you highlighted, I like that bit too.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. The sun never covets the properties of a shower, nor does Aesculapius interfere with the fruit-bearing god. Are not the stars different from each other? and yet their influences work towards the same end.
Yeah, just back to that harmony thing and what's called providence in this book, the divine plan, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. In a word, there is only one thing here worth the minding, and that is to be true and just, and to show benevolence even to the untrue and unjust. I always think of this as like the phrase "to be beyond reproach," of to keep yourself in a standing of ethical and moral position, I guess. And that's kind of what I saw when I read that. That was interesting. And he reemphasizes, being virtuous, do your business. Don't consider things impossible, just do it.
Oh yeah, did he have a funny wording about like if you just because it's beyond your skill level doesn't mean that it's impossible for humans, but in general.
Yeah.
But if it's possible for mankind in general, then you should believe that you too can do it.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Just do it.
Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Good.
And then he ends this book with and then how time will cover all things and how many it has covered already. And I was like, yes, impermanence. Gong sound.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that is book 6, so let's jump over to book 7 now. I immediately was struck with this phrase because I'm thinking about how, there's nothing new under the sun, right? That old colloquial phrase. There is nothing new to be met with, but all things are common and quickly over. Right? This idea that there's just nothing... I don't know. It's an interesting thought process to work through, I think.
Yeah, human experience remains mostly.
Yeah, and I
the
think
same.
about it as combating the 8th grade syndrome. This idea of like, I'm an edgelord and I'm entirely unique and no one understands my suffering. Like,
Wow.
I see
I like
that.
that 8th graders are Southern.
I use that accent with my students because it makes them laugh because they're not used to it. Because I live in Philadelphia right now. For nothing that does not enter my mind and get within me can hurt me. Hold to this and you are safe.
Yeah.
So I liked this idea of like, if we're not putting garbage in our brains, it's not going to become garbage inside of us, right? Like, something can't hurt me if I don't let it in the first place. And I thought that was a good sentiment and one that I struggle with, for sure.
I think most people do.
Yeah, I think that's a very human thing.
That paragraph sounds a lot like the other book we are reading. Say, like, just from the opinions can never be pulled out of your head unless the impressions on which they rest are first removed. It is in your power to kindle them afresh or to form a right judgment upon the present emergency. So maybe you're wrong in the past about something, but if you think about it and figure out what happened in the past, now everything in the present makes sense.
Yep.
And that's just very...
I think that's what I'm really enjoying
view.
about exploring these writings has been to see how much overlap there really is between this Stoic frame of thought and more Dharmic thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that. I like seeing the overlap where truths intermingle, and that there's not, in my own personal way of navigating the world, right? There's no one source of truth. The truth comes out in many places. And so it's learning to be receptive and to see it when it comes up, no matter its source. So,
Yeah.
but that's my personal philosophy. You don't have to live your life my way. This one I highlighted only because I personally am a borrow worry from the future kind of person. Be not disturbed about the future, for if ever you come to it, you will have the same reason for your guide, which preserves you at present. You're going to get there one way or the other, is effectively how I read that. And it's going to happen, regardless. Don't fixate on it. And then, once again, impermanence hits us with everything material quickly disappears into the universal matter. All very good.
Oh, before we go forward, there's just one part in the, was right at the beginning, number 7, I think?
Okay.
That said something about, like, letting people help you, which I think is, in the United States, at the very least, a very big failing of the culture. This sort of...
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of shame of asking for assistance, of letting people help, of the concept of like charity, that it's somehow shameful to not do everything all by yourself, and the culture is so individualistic. And here he's just like, isn't it just logical that if somebody, if you have something you need to do and you can't do it by yourself, like is that not what comrades are for? That they're supposed to help you, and even people that, I mean, the way this is worded, like a soldier, it's not necessarily somebody that you know well, even, or that you're very close with. It's just like your community. We are supposed to work together. We're supposed to offer our assistance to others, and also allow others to offer their assistance to us.
Yeah.
Sorry. My friend just messaged me about something about my house that they're checking in on for me, so I need to respond real quick.
Important things.
Adulting, following me. Where was my brain? I highlighted this big chunk in 16, and I'm looking over it going, what was my thought process? Oh yes, it was mostly at the beginning of that section where I felt like my mind does struggle with itself, and I felt like he was very on this idea of learning not to do that so you don't cause your own suffering. And then I just highlighted this question because I was like, yes, everyone's afraid of change, Marcus. Is anyone afraid of change? Yes.
And I highlighted the sentence right after that. I would gladly know what can be done without it. So basically, without change, nothing would ever happen.
Right. Nothing would ever happen without change. So to fear it seems ridiculous, right?
Pray, must not your word would be transformed before your bath can be ready for you? Yeah?
Yeah, all right.
Must not your meat be changed? Like the most simple little things. He's like, that's change, buddy.
Right. Yep. 21 was another moment of like, it will not be long before you will have forgotten all the world. In a little time, all the world will forget you too. Thanks, Marcus. I wasn't struggling with my mortality today, you're right.
Ironically, the world didn't forget him.
Yeah, ironically, yeah, he's one of the people the world goes back to a lot. Eventually, I imagine he'll be forgotten, but
yet
we currently live in a world that remembers him.
Yeah, but 10,000 years from now, or 100,000 years from now.
Oh, to peek into the future, I would be shocked if humans are still around in 10,000 years. I'm gonna be
there you go. Then nobody can remember him at all.
No one will remember him because there'll be no one to remember.
Yeah, I mean, but it says it will not be long now, considering, and...
We are but a grain of salt in the timeline of this universe.
2,000 years or whatever is still a long time by human reckoning.
Yep.
Oh.
But not for the whole timeline of the universe. So
he hits on change quite a bit in book 7. That being which governs nature will quickly change the present face of it. Yep. he just hits it a lot, which is fine. I think reemphasizing these ideas is fine. As we've discussed before, he's not really writing this for other people so much as himself. And so in that same way, I have to reiterate ideas to myself as well when I'm trying to ingrain them in my mind, in my practice. I was intrigued by what he said in 29, and I'm not sure that I interpreted it correct at all. He starts out with, rub out the colors of imagination. Do not suffer your passions to make a puppet of you. Confine your care to the present. And I have to say, my initial gut reading of this was that I was supposed to be really boring and not do the things I enjoy. But then when I thought about make a puppet of you, it seems to imply not letting them become your only fixation. I remember when I was younger and making art and I could paint for like 18 hours straight and forget to eat or drink water. I can't do that so much more now. Like, my body will be very loud about my needs. But there was a time where I absolutely could let my passions make a puppet of me. And I'm intrigued that he really emphasizes not letting this happen, right? Because sometimes my best work came from those times where I was so in the zone, I forgot I was a person separate from my work. So, I don't know.
I don't know that that's what he's getting at.
I don't think so either. This was just a one that I was like food for thought, right? Like, how would you pick it apart?
I think it's important to remember a few other times in the book, which not book 7, but like overall, where he's mentioned passion specifically is always a very negative thing. So I think if we consider all of those, I think it's maybe more equivalent to like an obsession in it, like a very emotionally driven, like mindless type of activity. So when he's saying rub out imagination, like don't be thinking up things that don't exist and letting that consume all of your mind and your body when like real life is all around you. And he's talking about being present, being mindful of what's actually going on now in the moment, instead of being so caught up in these things that don't exist and possibly can't even exist, and letting that drive all of your actions, and that you're sort of like living in a fairy tale world, like detached from reality. And like later in this number 29, toward the end, he's saying like you have to think upon your last hour, like think about, you're gonna die, is this worth your time, is this how you're supposed to be spending your life? And I think that if we look at it that way, maybe that's more in line with everything else he's saying too. Because actually, by his own definition, like creating art and things like that would be a good aim. That's a kind of work that human hands are made for, right? Maybe you shouldn't do it to the neglect of your body and your family and whatever else, right? But
Yeah.
But if we're thinking about like how our life exists, or like what actually exists in the world, is more important than figments of the imagination.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I am curious. I have a different translation pulled up to see how they, like, what does this passage talk about in this other version?
Oh,
It's number 29.
looking at a different translation, are you?
Yeah, see what they say. I can't read the original, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
in this other translation, they're talking about impulse and like making sure that you with you know, don't give in to the pulls of impulse. Recognize all that befalls you, like pay attention to what's happening in the present.
Okay.
Analyze the material things in the world, and remember death, of course. That's here too, so that's important. Yeah, just very much that. Don't be too impressionable. It's like don't be too emotional. Don't give in to impulse, and pay attention to what's going on. So that, I guess that's probably the bulk of it. maybe the specific wording that they've chose with imagination sounds like, we think of imagination as a great thing and being creative, and
Yeah.
maybe it's less about that and more about that whole, like, don't be irrational and let emotions overtake you.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Hooray, it makes sense.
Yay! I thought this was interesting. Can another man ride or fence better than you? It may be so. Let nobody outdo you in social and modest behavior. Let nobody be more resigned to fate and forgiving to his neighbors.
Wow.
I was just like, okay, Marcus. Like, I get it. I do. I just, for
There's
some
great
reason,
things to aim for.
like, all right, I'll aim for that. You got it, dude. And then his general, like, don't talk too much. Never make any rambling inquiries after other people's thoughts, but look directly at the mark which nature has set you.
Before that, he goes back to that at length. He talks about a bit more about because as we cannot hold on to life, we must not cling to it. So there's yeah, basically be ready to die
Yep.
at if something comes up that would demand that, or maybe even in the course of your duty. So if your duty demands for you to die, then you should just do that because
That's what you need to do.
neglecting your duty would be a bad thing. Yeah.
Yep. If that's your duty, do it. He's so duty driven. I mean, I commend him for it because, like, I'm fairly duty driven myself. I would say I try to. I am a bit of a lawful good in my day-to-day life. So if the boss says do XYZ, then by golly, I'm trying to do XYZ, right? Like, trying to hit those check marks. Consider what sort of people are they that must commend you, and how are their understandings furnished? I like this because I think it seems to imply not to just accept random praise. Like, really consider if that was had anything in grounding, or if it was just, I don't know, a random thing they did. It's interesting.
I thought this was about authority, though.
It is.
Like,
there's so much going on.
like literally, especially with he's army things, right? Like there's a lot about soldiers. If you think about the person who's above you, who must literally give the recommendation for you, but if they're like, you shouldn't just accept their judgment always, at least not blindly, because the next sentence there, if you consider the source of their opinions and passions, you will pity their ignorant misbehavior and not care a rush for their approbation.
Yeah.
It still should be your own judgment and critical thinking that comes into play, and not just blindly doing what your boss says or your commander.
Yeah. Ask think about where is it coming from, and is that fit with the righteousness that you're supposed to be moving through the world? Not righteousness. Yeah, I'm gonna go with righteousness. I don't have a better word. Talks about Socrates for a hot second.
Next, we didn't hear you just now. In case you were saying anything, that was just garbage coming through.
Oh no, that was just some garbage.
Yeah,
Okay.
Max is just making noises for funsies.
Yeah,
They do that.
the sound of my freezer.
And then in 63, it's what I said earlier. that no soul misses truth of her own goodwill. The same may be said with reference to justice, sobriety, good nature, and the like. So yeah, so basically, no one does evil for evil's sake or because they are evil by their nature, but
Because they don't know
rather
better. Yeah.
their truth is pointing maybe in the wrong direction.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I think, and then
Yeah.
keeping that in mind probably breeds more empathy, right? Like, you're going to be a more empathetic person when we keep these sorts of things in mind.
And exactly, he says this will help to sweeten your temper towards all men. So what you said, compassion and yeah.
Yeah, Schmear's things he said almost identical before, right? That
Yeah.
people do all kinds of bad things because they just don't really actually understand. And if they did understand, they would naturally do those things. If they really got that, behaving in all of the ways that he's laid out very clearly up to this point are the way to feel the best, to fulfill your nature, to, be at one with the universe and all of this, and that it's the only thing worth doing. It's the only thing. I think at one point he said something along the lines of, that's the only way you can be happy. And that, like he was talking about thieves and like all these people who are lying and cheating and all of that, they're never content. They're never satisfied. They just keep doing it. Nothing is ever good enough for them. And that the people who follow this more righteous path, they are satisfied and they are happy with what they do and they can see the truth in this way of living. And so these people that are being unjust and they're intoxicated and they're bad-natured and all, the opposite of this list, they're just people who don't really understand the truth, which is that's another parallel with the Buddhist text, isn't it? You're doing these things because you just haven't seen the truth yet. Let us tell you the truth.
Let us tell you. Indeed.
Yeah, and then on 68, it's again reiterating once again that thought. Even if you were eaten by wild beasts, this must not necessarily ruffle your feathers or your mental feathers, so to speak.
I highlighted 71 because I really liked this point out. Like, it would be silly to focus on other people rather than what you can change about yourself, right? Because you're never going to change other people and their faults and what's going on there, but you instead need to focus on your own faults, right?
Yeah, I highlighted that as well, yeah.
So I enjoyed that. I thought that was a great thing to point out. And then at the end, I highlighted, now this thought will go a great way towards making a man easy. And I thought that was interesting. I know it's referring to the text right before it, where it's just this coming into the universal principle. But I also think that it summates a lot of other things he says, this idea of becoming somebody that probably doesn't ruffle feathers, to use some of the verbiage from earlier that Ben was using, of this idea of, if you're living this stoic lifestyle that's presented here in this text, you're probably a fairly well-liked person. I'm going to be honest. You're easygoing. You just do what you got to do. People don't probably have to fight you to get work done out of you. Like, it's just, you're probably not a combative person, and that probably would be a well-liked person. Or an easy person, as it were.
And a wise one, too.
And a wise one.
See, he very often talks about self-reflection and reflecting on the state of the world and all of this.
Right.
Number 70 is one of the funny ones to me. He's saying, like, gods are immortal and have had their patience tried for so many ages, but they still provide for us, right? They had to deal with all this garbage for so long, for all of history, and they still provide liberally. And then, and are you that are just going off the stage sick of the company? Are you tired with evil men already, and yet one of those unhappy mortals yourself? Like, stop being a misanthrope. You're ridiculous.
You're being ridiculous. You haven't been alive that long. Calm down.
Like, the gods have done this forever. You're just born. What the heck do you have to be upset about?
What do you have to be upset about? You ain't seen nothing yet.
They've seen it all, and they still love us, so, you know,
Yeah.
do better. I thought that's funny, because that's such a common... I think that also, not only is it a common occurrence that people have that attitude, but they also act like they're somehow superior to everybody having that attitude.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've all met people like that, like, people are terrible, and somehow I'm better than that. It's like, no, you're the same. You're
You're the same. You're the same.
Like, I hate people. Like,
You are people. God, good
you
luck.
are people.
Right. You are the people that you hate. You're doing the thing you don't like people doing.
You're not in traffic. You are traffic.
Yeah. If all you can do is scorn and, you know, make faces of disgust and rude commentary about people and, I don't know, take selfish actions as a result of it, like, you're literally the same. You're upset they're doing those things, and now you're doing those things. And maybe you might be slightly smarter than them. But what difference did it make? If that's how you chose to conduct yourself after... I thought that one kind of made me laugh, because it's a very good point. But it's also somewhat, maybe... It's kind of funny, unintentionally maybe, that this is written so long ago, and it's literally the same.
Yeah.
We have all the same archetypes, I guess we'll say. Every
Yeah.
kind of person that he talks about in this text are exactly like that still.
Go team.